Recently, there's been a lot of discussion about opening up the economy. And in response, several politicians had said, well, grandparents will be willing to die for the economy. And others said, it's okay to die for the economy. In response, a flurry of tweets appeared on the internet. Take, for instance, this one. We'll start with, it's a quoted tweet. So we'll start with Joe Scarborough. Are Republicans moving toward the position that the stock market is more important than saving seniors' lives? Are the statements of the president and the allies trial balloons that will be deflated before too many seniors die? The health of seniors must trump stock prices. Ned Price then retweeted that as with a comment, I'm reminded of the classic Wilfred Owen line, dulce et decorum est pro Nasdaq mori. Pay attention to that, pro Nasdaq mori. The Nasdaq is what is important there. Hugh Jagger. NHS staff, that's the National Health Service in Britain, killed by COVID-19 did not give their lives or make the ultimate sacrifice. Tories killed them by ignoring multiple warnings to prepare for a pandemic. Doubtless the UK will erect a monument to victims. May as well inscribe on it the old lie, dulce et decorum est. Caroline Atkinson, April 18th. When Wilfred Owen wrote Dulce et decorum est, he was bitterly satirizing the narrative that said that young men are dying were heroes. A century on, we're still using this language, this time for the NHS. Instead, give them PPE, give them a pay raise, abolish visa fees. Craig Calcaterra. Today's pandemic diary, Dulce et decorum est, pro Applebee's mori. And then Alexander Petrie. That old lie, dulce et decorum est, pro temporary bump in the stock market, mori. As you can see from Ned's, Alexandra's, and Hugh's line, Craig's line, everything is the same with dulce et decorum est, pro, and then they add this little bit, and then mori. What we're going to do today is figure out what this common sense comes from. What are they all referencing? And the fact is, they're all referencing a very, very famous World War I poem called Dulce et decorum est, which we're going to get to. Don't worry, we're going to translate it. I want to keep going like this for now. So here we go. Wilfred Owen, Dulce et decorum est, written in 1917 when the author was only 20 years old and published posthumously in 1920. So he died very, very young. He was in World War I. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched to sleep, many had lost their boots, but limped on, blood-shod. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Gas! Gas! Quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, but someone still was yelling out and stumbling, and floundering like a man in fire or lime, dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face like a devil's sack of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud, of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory, the old lie, dulce et decorum est, pro patria mori. What it means is, it is sweet and right to die for one's country. What we're going to do is discuss this poem in sections, because there's 3 very specific sections. You could probably divide it into 4. I'm not going to be giving all of the poetic devices because the poem is a masterpiece and there's many interpretations of it online that actually go through these different levels. I am going to focus, though, on how it connects to some things that we've been studying this semester in seminar. So let's begin with the first stanza. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and toward our distant rest began to trudge. Notice all of these monosyllables that we have: bent double, old beggars. So there we have, the poem is really going to rely heavily on alliteration, because we have the bent beggars, we have them knock-kneed, coughing like hags. Right? A hag is it's an old woman. So what this does is it turns these young masculine soldiers into old women, and they're cursing through sludge. Right, so the sludge and then later on the trudge is going to be these two elements, right? He's using rhyme in order to emphasize this. The sacks are on their backs, weighing them down. We've also seen some hags, because the witches are sometimes called hags from Macbeth, and so there might be a sense of a connection there with the futility of war, frustration of war, the kind of idea that Macbeth was going to be this great hero, but he ends up being tormented. This is a theme I'm going to want to pursue. And towards our distant rest, right? The distant rest is an interesting idea because it can imply both a place where you put your head, but also the distant rest is heaven, right? It's or the afterworld. Men marched asleep. It's not men marched as if they were asleep. It's men marched asleep. And you'll also remember that we've talked about several times how sleep is the close sibling, the brother of death. These are not men that are moving quickly. They're moving almost as if through a dream. And dreams are also going to be important in a moment. Many of these men had lost their boots, but limped on bloodshod. To shod something is usually with horses. You've shod a horse. These men, though, have bloody feet, and all of them went lame. All of them went blind. We're going to pick up on why they've gone blind in a moment. But here we learn more. They marched as if asleep, and now we learn they're drunk with fatigue. Right? That means that they are not operating at a kind of normal critical level. Drunk and deaf, so that we have some alliteration. And here's what's important. They are drunk to the hoots. The hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. I want to pay a lot of attention to this word hoot, because you might remember we've spent a fair amount of time with those beasts, the birds that hoot, right? Those are owls. And an important part about this poem, which we're invited to think about from the very beginning, is its relationship to ancient Greece and Rome, right? The opening tag, dulce et decorum est, is Latin. And so we're invited to think about this in a classical context, in which case you will remember that owls represent portents of doom or danger in the future, that the present action is actually going to lead us closer to death. Thus, for instance, we had owls hooting on the roof at the moment when Aeneas and Dido got married. So if you want to go back to book 4 of the Aeneid, you can see that. And here what we have are the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. That adverb, softly, just haunts me. Now we're going to switch into the second half, or the second part of the poem. So here we had all of the setup of the men walking away from battle, right? If you're walking away from battle, you're going toward your rest. They're exhausted, and suddenly they hear this hoot, this portent of doom from behind them, and it's gas shells. And now Owens is going to give us one of the most evocative descriptions of a gas attack that we have. Gas! Gas, quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, but someone still was yelling out and stumbling, and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea I saw him drowning. Notice this flurry of monosyllabic exclamations. Gas, gas, quick, boys. Right, this is not following traditional rhythms in an iambic pentameter. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. This is a double spondy. Gas, gas, quick, boys. And then this shift into all of these participles, an ecstasy, a fumbling. We listen to that rhythm, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, and someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. And these monosyllables suddenly slow us down as we get stuck in them almost, dim through the misty panes and thick green light. This is a chlorine gas attack. So you'll probably be familiar with mustard gas, which is a yellow substance that kind of sticks to the ground. Chlorine gas is green. An important moment here happens with this idea of ecstasy. It's a very odd word, right? We tend to think of ecstasy as enormous emotional happiness, joy, but it's a certain level of excess. It's also an ancient word, a classical word. It comes from ecstasis, which literally means to displace something or make something stand outside. Histemi is this word that means to make something to stand, and ek means out. And so it's like you're setting something up out. And so it's almost as though these individual soldiers are displaced from themselves. They don't know what they're doing anymore. These boys. And so what do? They fit the clumsy helmets. Notice you might expect the people to be clumsy, but instead it's the helmets that are clumsy. That's because gas warfare was brand new. It was something that the Germans were surprising the Allies with. And the people, soldiers, were rushing to figure out how to make these helmets, how to make them fit. So they didn't fit well. They were awkward. They were cumbersome. If you didn't get the seals tight, the gas would still come in. And some of them are doing it just in time, but it's not the nick of time because someone still was yelling. And now we're going to focus on this individual that's going to have the gas leak in. And he's floundering. Flounder is a word that has to do with water. And now we're going to pick up this water imagery because he's dim through misty panes and thick green light. And then the simile, as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. I is very important because that's the speaker talking. This is a first person account. Suddenly that's what we have. He's saying, this happened to me. I was one of these boys. And hence we get this language of the drowning, right? This is an image of great danger and suffocation, even though this is a gas. And we enter the last. In all my dreams before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. In all my dreams, that means that the speaker of the poem is haunted by this moment, right? It's returning to him several times. And especially in dreams, but also at that moment, it was a helpless sight. The speaker couldn't do anything. And I want you to notice something, right? Everything here, pay attention to the verbs, but somebody was yelling and stumbling and floundering. I saw. So that second section, we had the past tense verbs. In the first section, we had the past tense verbs. We turned, men marched. And now, as we've shifted the dreams, it plunges. We're in the present tense. This is the moment the speaker, after this moment has happened, is still being haunted by it in a continual presence of bringing back the past. The guttering is interesting because it's the sound that a candle makes when it stops getting enough oxygen. If you picture a candle, put a cup over a candle, and it's how the flame starts flickering lower and lower and lower. This might remind you, and I think it's okay for it too, of Macbeth, out, out, brief candle. And then we pick up on the language of the choking and the drowning again. And now Wilfred Owen is going to give us the last section. And it begins with a conditional clause. If in some smothering dreams, so whether we're going to make this connection, you too. So we have this direct address to some you out there. So if in some smothering dreams you could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in and watch the white eyes writhing in the face, his hanging face like a devil's sick of sin, if you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud, of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, dulce et decorum est, pro patria mori. So the way that this last stanza is constructed is two conditional clauses, if, and a then clause, a result clause, then this other thing would happen. So let's look at some of these things. If you could pace behind the wagon and watch. So there we have sight. And then we have sound. If you could hear every jolt, the blood come gargling. And then we get bitter, which is taste. So we're getting a buildup of all of the senses. But even at this moment, Wilfred Owens is still giving us something. I mean, he's coughing up his lungs, this person, right, from the gas attack. And Owen says it's obscene as cancer. And even at this moment, he's giving us some wordplay. Something that's obscene is something that's disgusting, right? But notice inside of obscene, we have seen. Wilfred Owens has constructed this scene for us, and now he's drawing attention to it. This scene is obscene. And then it's bitter as the cud. And the cud is a very interesting word, right? You'll think about cows. What they do is it's partially digested food that then you bring back up. And so much like this scene, much like this dream, this recurrent nightmare, it's constantly coming up. A vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues. Notice these negatives here. The incurable can't be cured. The innocent can't cause harm. Tongues, right? But whose tongue can still work? Owen's, right? The poet's tongue can still speak on behalf of these young men that have died. And then that hard turn out, you. And he calls him my friend in a deeply ironic moment, right? Because this is not a friend. These are the people back home saying, hey, young men, go die for your country. It is sweet and right to die for your country. And who are they telling this to? They're telling it to children, and they're doing so with zest. Right? Zest is also a flavor word. Right? It's like the flavor, the sharp addition that draws things out and makes them interesting to taste. Unlike what we discovered is the bitterness that's there. And the children are ardent. Ardent is another Latinate word that means burning. And so we've had the children that are burning for glory who now are guttering, right? The flame has gone out. What I want to do now is connect this to some other things that we've covered in this course so far, specifically looking at some of the Greek and Roman contexts. Here's the origin of that quotation. It comes from a Roman poet named Horace, whose life overlapped a fair amount with Virgil's. He wrote a sequence of poems called the Odes, and in book 3 of the Odes, he wrote a sequence called the kind of Roman Odes. And they seem to glorify the pursuit of the Roman Empire, a switch out of the Republic and toward a new form of government. And he wrote, dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. Do you see how that line is all one line of poetry? Wilfred Owens, I think, has done something very clever when he's broken it off. He said, like, this line is broken in itself. Another thing that you might find interesting is in order to make the line work in Owens, you have to pronounce it all, dulce et decorum est, pro patria mori. But in order to make the line work in Latin, you have to undergo what's called elision, which is where you bring certain sounds together based on how they words end and begin. So it's actually dulce et decor est, pro patria mori, and the words fit together much more tightly, but that's just an aside. So what has he said? It is sweet and right to die for one's country. Death pursues even a fleeing man. It spares not the hamstrings or the cowardly back of the unwarlike youth. So much of the stanza, it reflects upon our other poem, right? We had the line with which we ended. We also began Owens's poem with the image of the soldiers walking away. They were going toward the rest, but then death still followed them. It caught them in the back. And notice that unwarlike youth. That's what we had right there. This was the children that Owens is talking about. In Horace, he says that death does not spare these people. We had a very important moment of this idea of sparing earlier on in the Aeneid in book 6. So I want to go to that passage now. Others, I can well believe, will hammer out bronze that breathes with more delicacy than us, draw out living features from the marble, plead their causes better, trace with instruments the movement of the skies and tell the rising of the constellations. Remember, Roman, it is for you to rule the nations with your power. That will be your skill, to crown peace with law, to spare the conquered, and subdue the proud. Well, death doesn't spare. These boys are not spared. Even they have not subdued the proud. What Owens is saying, it seems to be, is Britain, you are waging a war on false pretenses. You're telling these soldiers that it's right to die for their country, but actually they are just dying and they don't really know what for. A couple of other things that this connects to. You'll remember this exchange at the end of Macbeth. Had he his hurts before? Aye, on the front. Why then, God's soldier be he. Had I as many sons as I have hairs, I would not wish them to a fairer death, and so his knell is knolled. He's worth more sorrow, and that I'll spend for him. He's worth no more. They say he parted well and paid his score, and so God be with him. Here comes newer comfort. You'll remember our discussion about had he his hurts before, right? He got the wounds in the front. Compare how Horace said, death will still come to you if you are a fleeing man, right? It'll come to you in the back, in your knees. Well, Macbeth had this idea of martial heroism where, it's okay to die as long as you have it in your front. And of course, young Seward died for his country. So we see the similar theme in Macbeth. And that's what I'm trying to point out to at that point. A poem that we didn't look at, but I think fits in nicely with this, is by an archaic Greek lyric poet named Archilochus. This is his 5th fragment, and translation comes from the Loeb. And he was a soldier, sailor, drinker, partier. One of the Scions, which is a Thracian tribe that he was waging war with, now delights in the shield I discarded, unwillingly near a bush, for it was perfectly good. But at least I got myself safely out. Why should I care for that shield? Let it go. Some other time I'll find another no worse. Here, Archilochus is overturning this language of not running away, right? It's good and right to die for your country. He's like, heck no, I ran away. I threw away my shield and I booked it out of there. The language that this fits into is a stereotyped phrase that you'll hear every once in a while about the Spartans, and you'll get this repeated on white supremacist discourse, but this idea that come back with your shield or on it, right? Don't throw it away and come back without it because that's dishonorable. But here, Archilochus is reframing that discourse, which also reframes everything else that we've seen. There is nothing when you read through Wilfred Owen's poem that says it is dulce et decorum est, right? That sweetness, that's dulce. Well, he contrasted that with the bitterness of the cud. So let's look again at these tweets. Right now you have a little bit more context for what they're saying. And it's sweet and right to die for the economy, right? That's what they're all emphasizing, right? So this is going to raise a question that I'm going to want you to deal with on the forum, but I have a bunch of forums. Some questions. Do you think that the tweets referencing this tag as the old lie do a disservice to the original context of the poem? Right. So this is a similar question to the one that we dealt with back with William Butler Yeats' Second Coming. Another critical question. Pick an image or metaphor from Owens's poem. How does he develop it to achieve pathos? Another. What military references have you seen in regard to the current COVID-19 crisis? Why do you think the public discourse gravitates toward militaristic language or imagery? Right, this is so the idea that, well, we're going to wage war on this. We're campaigning against it. Right? What's going on? Have you noticed any of that language? Number 4, what is another connection you can make from Owens's poem to other texts and ideas we have read, seen, or discussed? The wasteland is the easiest, I think, to make connections to, but there might be others that come to your mind. Number 5, how is an old lie different from a proverb or other commonplace sayings? So think of things that are these commonplaces, these proverbs, and ask yourselves, can you unpack them further? And then a creative one that might also be critical. Pick any phrase that comes into your mind, with a quotation, whether from a TV show, a movie, a book, or a song. Write it down. This is now your new old lie. What is it saying? Right? So how can you work yourself around that idea? All right, very good. I hope that you are getting enough rest and finding ways to keep yourself at peace.